Ilia Topuria is angry. Not fight week angry. Not promotional angry. Genuinely, personally, viscerally angry. Justin Gaethje brought up his divorce. He made a comment about his ex-wife, something along the lines of, "I would have left you too," and Topuria has not moved past it. He said his daughter was involved in that conversation. He said his family was involved. He said Gaethje can call it a joke all he wants, but the man who uses the word idiot with a cold smile on his face is not someone who is confused about whether something was funny. He is someone who has filed it away, processed it, and converted it into fuel. And the specific thing he said, that after what Gaethje said, knocking him out is going to taste a little bit better, is one of the more quietly terrifying things a fighter has said in a pre-fight media cycle in recent memory. Because Topuria's knockouts already look like they taste pretty good to him. Adding personal motivation to that system is not something that benefits Justin Gaethje. The divorce comment is the emotional spine of Fight Week, but there is a tactical revelation buried inside Topuria's media day session that deserves equal attention. He was asked how he thinks Gaethje will approach the fight. And instead of the standard dismissal, "He's going to come forward, I'm going to knock him out," end of analysis, Topuria gave a specific, detailed prediction of a completely different Gaethje than the one most people are preparing to watch. He said Gaethje is going to try to wrestle. He said Gaethje is going to use hard leg kicks, inside and outside. He said the strategy will be to extend the fight into later rounds and then find the finish when Topuria is fading. That is not a prediction built on contempt. That is a prediction built on film study. Topuria's camp has watched the footage, identified what a smart Gaethje game plan against a power puncher looks like, and Topuria is telling the world that he knows it is coming. Which means one of two things. Either he is so confident in his ability to stop it that he does not care about announcing it publicly, or he is doing something psychologically sophisticated by telling Gaethje he knows the plan, which forces Gaethje to either change it or execute it knowing his opponent is fully prepared. Either interpretation is interesting. Neither one favors Gaethje. Gaethje's response to Topuria's first-round knockout prediction is actually the most strategically intelligent thing he has said in this entire fight week. He argued that Topuria has written a check he might not be able to cash, that when the fight goes to round 2, when it goes to round 3, the mental weight of not having finished what he publicly guaranteed starts to work against the champion. He said he goes into every fight expecting a 25-minute war, expecting to dig deep, expecting adversity. He does not carry the psychological burden of a specific timeline. Topuria does. If round 2 arrives and Gaethje is still standing and still dangerous, every additional second is a small psychological win for the challenger and a small psychological cost for the champion who said this would already be over. It is not the most likely scenario. But it is a real scenario, and Gaethje is smart enough to have identified it. Joe Rogan has been the most prominent voice pushing back against the consensus, and his argument is worth taking seriously because it is not built on sentiment. Rogan specifically referenced the Jay Herbert fight, one of Topuria's early UFC appearances, where Herbert landed a switch kick to the head that dropped Topuria cleanly. He recovered brilliantly, but the point is that Topuria has been dropped, has been hurt, has been in the moment where the fight could have ended differently. And Rogan's broader argument is that Gaethje is a much bigger man than most of Topuria's recent opponents, that he hits harder than people calculate when they think of him as a volume fighter rather than a power fighter, and that his absolute commitment to forward pressure and violence, the pitbull mentality that has never switched off regardless of what is happening in any fight, makes him dangerous in a way that tactical analysis sometimes undersells. The specific unpredictability of a man who commits everything on every exchange, who does not have a conservative mode, who does not protect himself when the opening appears, that kind of fighter creates the moments that end dominant champions in ways nobody predicted. The GOAT conversation surrounding Pereira at the White House is worth addressing because it reveals something important about the stakes of the co-main event that goes beyond the interim title. Dana White opened the door to the greatest of all-time conversation publicly. Mauricio Ruffy, who will be watching from ringside after his own fight on the card, closed it with a definitive statement: 3 belts in 3 different weight divisions, something no one has ever done, means there is zero argument. Daniel Cormier, who was asked this question directly by Pereira himself before giving the answer, said not yet, that defending the heavyweight title would be required before that conversation becomes complete. But the framework is established. A Pereira win on Sunday does not just give him an interim belt and a date with Tom Aspinall. It places him in a conversation that was previously reserved for fighters who competed over years and across multiple championship reigns. Pereira would be doing it in a compressed timeline that has no parallel in the sport's history. Pereira's own response to the GOAT question was characteristically understated and unexpectedly humble for a man known for towering confidence. He said he did not follow all the greats closely enough to make the comparison himself. He said the people who cover the sport are the ones making the case. He said belonging in that category is meaningful to him, but he was not going to claim it unilaterally. That is a different posture than the Pereira who has sometimes bulldozed through these conversations with pure assertion. It reads as genuine rather than strategic, and it adds a dimension to the fight that is easy to miss when you are focused on the athletic contest. A man who genuinely does not know yet whether what he is doing will be remembered the way the people around him say it will be. The Pereira versus Hockett subplot adds a layer of intrigue that has not fully resolved itself heading into fight night. Hockett has been making noise in Pereira's direction all week in Washington, D.C., trying to generate a confrontation, trying to get the champion engaged in a secondary conflict before the Gaethje fight. Pereira's response was unexpected and in its own way more damaging than any counter-trash talk could have been. He said he did not want to discuss Hockett because he had heard things, unspecified things, about whether Hockett would even still be in the UFC after this fight. He was careful not to elaborate, citing information he claimed he could not share. Hockett responded on social media by saying he just signed an 8-fight deal and demanding an explanation. The exchange tells you something about how Pereira operates when he chooses to engage. Not with volume, not with performance, but with a single well-placed comment designed to create maximum psychological disruption with minimum information. Whether the information is real is almost beside the point. The doubt is planted. The eye poke question around the Gaethje fight is not going away, and Pereira's handling of it was more measured than expected. He said he is not worried about it but acknowledged that Gaethje has committed irregularities, his word, more than once, and that people are starting to see it a different way. He suggested Gaethje needs to make adjustments to how he holds his hands, not as an accusation of intent, but as a practical observation about a pattern that exists in the record. Gaethje responded by pointing to the referee and suggesting that if there was intent, he would have been told by the official. The truth of the eye poke history, whether it is a mechanical habit or something more deliberate, is ultimately unknowable from outside the cage. What is knowable is that Tom Aspinall's fight was ended by it, and that Pereira has thought about it and decided it is not something that will change his approach on Sunday. The lawsuit situation has essentially resolved in the UFC's favor for now. The Justice Department's response, the line about no one holding anyone in a jiu-jitsu lock forcing them to watch the event against their will, was as much a rhetorical dismissal as a legal argument, and it appears to have been sufficient to keep the event on schedule. The Octagon is on the South Lawn. The production is complete. The walkout path from the Oval Office has been revealed. The claw is standing. Whatever the legal merits of the underlying complaint, the practical reality is that fight night is happening, and the images that come out of Sunday are going to be unlike anything the sport has produced before. The Zahabi versus O'Malley fight carries a subplot that is easy to miss in all the main event noise. O'Malley said publicly that he does not think the next bantamweight title shot will involve him regardless of what happens on Sunday, that Peter Yan versus Merab Dvalishvili in a trilogy looks like the direction the division is heading. That is an unusual level of self-awareness from a fighter in the middle of fight week, and it changes the psychological texture of his preparation. He is not fighting with the expectation that a win opens a direct title shot. He is fighting to stay relevant, to maintain his position, to keep the conversation going about what his career looks like in the post-championship chapter. Zahabi, meanwhile, is fighting for the exact opposite reason, to announce himself, to break out of 7 fights of anonymity, to give the bantamweight division a conversation it was not expecting. The asymmetry of motivation between these two fighters is one of the most interesting dynamics on the entire card. Here is how Sunday resolves. Topuria comes out with more personal edge than he has carried into any previous fight, which makes him more dangerous than his default version. Gaethje implements the smarter game plan that Topuria has publicly predicted, the leg kicks, the wrestling threat, the extension into later rounds, and makes the first 2 minutes look like it might actually go the distance. And then Topuria finds the opening, the way he always finds it, and the first-round prediction he made repeatedly throughout fight week becomes the result that plays on highlight reels for the next decade. Pereira solves Gaethje's movement sometime in the middle rounds when the calf kick accumulation finally slows the footwork enough for the left hook to land. Zahabi upsets O'Malley in a fight that is closer than the odds suggested, but ends in the kind of statement finish that a title eliminator requires. And the White House lawn produces images that will be referenced every time anyone talks about the UFC for the next generation of fans.